Today, our Lord tells us that if we ask, it will be given. If we seek, we will find. And if we knock, the door will be opened. Yet, at the same time, if we look back on our lives, we can say, but, I have asked. I've knocked, I've begged, and I haven't gotten, what I asked for. So it would seem that this promise of our Lord isn't fulfilled. But, if we really stop and ponder it deeply, we'll see that God gave us precisely what we truly needed. Not necessarily what we asked for, but what was best. It doesn't always seem that way because at the time, we wouldn't be asking for something if we didn't think that it was good for us. But, we wouldn't ask if we thought it was bad. But God, in His mercy, knows that He knows what's truly good for us. And, He's always going to provide for us the very best. We also learn from the first reading the way that we should pray. For many of us, the concept of prayer is to just, toss out some little request and think that that's enough. Yet, when we look at the first reading and we see Queen Esther, who is going to the king without being summoned, and if you do that and he doesn't extend to you the golden scepter, it's the death penalty. So she said she's taking her life in her own hands to plead on behalf of her people. She and all of her maids fasted. They prostrated themselves before the Lord from morning until evening, and they prayed. Now, I'm not saying that for every request, we have to be doing that, but it helps us, to be able to see that example, because, if all we're doing is tossing out a little request here and there and then leaving it be, it doesn't come across as something that's all that important. If it were really important, we would be making a greater effort. Now, with that said, we recall the example of King David, who fasted and prayed for the life of the child that had been conceived through Bathsheba. The child died. He didn't get what he was praying for, even though he laid prostrate before the Lord. But, this was because, first of all, the Lord had foretold this, through the prophet Nathan, but also because it was what was truly best. So we see that God sometimes allows very difficult trials, trials that we would consider, horrible tragedies. Now, we just heard the Lord tell us, though, which one of you, if your son asked for a loaf of bread, would give him a rock, or if he asked for a fish, he'd give him a snake. Yet, it seems sometimes that we ask for one thing and God seems to give us the worst. What can actually be very painful. And we say, hey, I was asking for a loaf of bread, why did I get a rock? But as we move on along in life, we can look back at what God has done, and in fact, we can see that it wasn't a rock. It just wasn't what we were asking for. Maybe what we were asking for was a snake or a scorpion. We just didn't realize it at the time. But, God knew in the long run that it would hurt us. So, He doesn't let some people win the lottery, even though they're praying for it, because He could get them into a lot of trouble, or they could get into a lot of trouble if they had all that money. If we put everything in proper context, we'll be able to see what God gave us really was a gift, although it didn't seem like that at the time. In reality, what God gives us is always the very best thing. Not always a pleasant thing, not always an easy thing, but always the very best.